The National Capital Region has become the main hub for education and training in the field of heritage conservation in Canada, and a key node within the North American conservation community. The local conference committee for the joint Association for Preservation Technology and National Trust for Canada Conference 2017 wishes to pay tribute to the APT and NTC pioneers from the region who have passed away and played a major role in the early days of the heritage preservation movement and profession locally, nationally, and internationally. Voici un aperçu des carrières et des contributions de ces pionniers qui, ensemble, forment un collectif impressionnant de professionnels de la conservation ayant vécu et travaillé dans la région de la Capitale nationale. Longtime APT member Susan Buggy was a quiet pioneer who understood the broad scope of APT and brought cultural landscapes into focus. In APT, she found colleagues who shared her interest in cultural landscapes, and together they organized the Alliance for Historic Landscape Preservation in 1978. She was the guest editor for the special issues of the Bulletin on Landscapes, published in 1977, 79, 92, and 2000. In 1999, she was inducted into the APT College of Fellows. Her expanding interest in cultural landscapes and international activities brought far-reaching networking connections to APT meetings. Pendant 30 ans, Susan a travaillé en recherche historique, documentant et évaluant les lieux historiques de Parcs Canada. Elle a joué un rôle clé dans le développement du concept de paysage culturel. Susan became Director of Historical Services at Parks Canada and taught at universities in Montreal, Victoria, and Winnipeg. In the early 1990s, she participated in UNESCO's international expert meetings to develop guidelines for including cultural landscapes on the World Heritage List. She was also a great friend to the Willowbank School of Restoration Arts, and it was through her generous gift to the school that it was able to create the Susan Buggy Cultural Landscapes Fellowship.
Landscape preservation, this is in the mid-1970s. Landscape was a tabula rasa. There's nothing so attractive as a tabula rasa with great opportunity. I never looked back.
Jacques De Silva est un membre fondateur de l'APT et il a pris part à la première réunion qui s'est déroulée à New Richmond, au Québec, en 1968. He served as the founding editor of APT's Bulletin from 1968 to 1973 and was APT's third president from 1972 to 1974. Over the course of his professional life, he was an educator, architect, planner, author, administrator, and always a visionary. Jacques started his career working as a senior exhibit designer for the Canadian Pavilion at Expo 67 in Montreal, but the disconnection of modern architecture from its surroundings and the damage being done to the city's heritage inspired him to turn to preservation. From 1968 to 1977, he worked at Parks Canada as the first chief of restoration services. Il a eu un rôle clé dans la conservation de nombreux lieux historiques nationaux, comme la forteresse de Louisbourg en Nouvelle-Écosse, le parc de l'Artillerie à Québec et Dawson City au Yukon. In 1970, while at Parks Canada, he graduated from the preservation program at Columbia University, becoming the first Canadian architect with a master's degree in this specialization. In 1977, he returned to Columbia as a director of the preservation program before becoming the executive director of the Heritage Canada Foundation, now the National Trust for Canada, from 1978 to 1995. He was responsible for creating various programs including Main Street Canada, the Canadian Centre for Livable Cities, and the Canadian Heritage Network. Jacques was also a founding member of ICOMOS Canada, which he served as president from 1969 to 1990. At the international level, he served as ICOMOS International's Treasurer General and as UNESCO's representative during the conflict in Cyprus. He received numerous awards, including the Order of Canada in 1991. Jacques De Silva was instrumental in developing the preservation field in Canada and in training future practitioners who continue to play an important role today. Adele Faulkner served as the first APT Executive Director from 1975 to 1988. She was friendly and efficient. She was the cement that kept the early conservation professionals together, despite differences in views and approaches. She coordinated the organization of APT conferences beginning in 1975 with Williamsburg, then in 13 other major cities across Canada and the USA. She authored the 1971 book on heritage preservation, Without Our Past, published by the University of Toronto Press, at a time when Canadians were becoming interested in preserving heritage buildings. Anne a eu un rôle déterminant dans la sauvegarde du domaine Billings à Ottawa, le transformant en musée fréquenté par plus de 10 000 visiteurs par an. Her crowning achievement may be the rescue of the Maple Lawn Garden Estate in Ottawa, said to be the only residential walled garden in Canada. Robin Letellier a joint Parc Canada peu après sa graduation de l'Université Laval et a gravi les échelons pour devenir le chef des services de relevé du patrimoine. After 2000, Robin worked as a heritage conservation management consultant specialized in heritage recording. Beginning in 2002, he was also strongly involved as the international coordinator for the Recordem Initiative, a partnership of a number of international and national heritage organizations working together to bridge the gaps in the heritage field between information users and information providers. As part of this initiative, he authored a textbook entitled Recording, Documentation, and Information Management for the Conservation of Heritage Places, Guiding Principles. For over 20 years, Robin was a regular lecturer at ICROM on aspects of heritage recording. Robin was instrumental in the development of the joint ICROM-Getty Conservation Institute course on architectural records, inventories, and information systems for conservation. Robin was an active member of ICOMOS Canada, as well as a longtime APT member, supporter, and advocate. He understood that much of the built heritage we see today will disappear, and that the next generations will only discover it through documentation. Bob Phillips had a remarkable career as a diplomat and journalist. He dedicated most of his life to heritage conservation. At the grassroots level, he wrote several books, hundreds of articles about heritage conservation for newspapers, and feature stories in magazines. With his wife Marianne and friends, he created a Capital for Canadians in 1967, which evolved into Heritage Ottawa in 1975 with Bob as its president. They were responsible for saving such historic Ottawa landmarks as the Ottawa Union Station, Fraser Schoolhouse, Byward Market Building, Nicholas Street Jail, Parliament East Block, the Aberdeen Pavilion, the Billings Estate, Sunnyside Fire Station, Rideau Street Convent, and Ottawa Teachers College, and was part of the discussion to transform the Rideau Canal into the world's largest skating rink. He was awarded the Order of Canada and the Ottawa Civic Appreciation Award for Heritage. Bob helped convince the Government of Canada to create the Heritage Canada Foundation in 1973 with an endowment of $12 million. He was its founding executive director until 1978. Le nom de Bob Phillips est intimement lié à la création d'Héritage Canada, aujourd'hui la fiducie nationale du Canada. As a project for Canada's centennial in 1967, Bob and Marianne rescued an endangered 1860s pioneer log cabin from a farm west of Ottawa, then moved and resurrected it on a 28-acre Cantley property in the Gatineau. It has taken on yet another life today as La Grange de la Gatineau, a favorite spot for meetings, shows, and weddings. During his retirement, Bob purchased and was editor of 2 community newspapers. Peter John Stokes was also one of the founding members of APT in 1968. He acquired his love of heritage buildings through his travels with his father when growing up in England. From 1958 on, he was the restoration architect of Upper Canada Village in Morrisburg, Ontario, and later wrote A Village Arising, the story of the building of Upper Canada Village, published in 2011. He launched his private practice as Ontario's first consultant restoration architect in 1961, and later that decade he moved to the restoration site of King's Landing in New Brunswick. Back in Ontario, Peter restored buildings across the province, the St. Lawrence Hotel in Port Hope, the Grange at the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, the courthouse in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and the Laura Secord House in Queenston, among others. He was consulting restoration advocate at the Willowbank School of Restoration Arts in Queenston. C'est à Port Hope et à Niagara-on-the-Lake que Peter John Stokes a fait ses plus grands projets. Il est demeuré fidèle à ses municipalités jusqu'à la fin de ses jours.
I must have got there by car. I can't remember otherwise. And I remember most of the people who were involved there. Tory Fuller, who was one of the principal organizers. I hadn't known Dave Bartlett at that time, but I knew Jim Hinnick, Joel Budner,
Jacques.
George Mabeth.
Did you know Jacques Delibard?
Jacques.
Herb Stovall was one of the world's most renowned experts in heritage conservation. As a scholar and a teacher, he had a huge impact on the advancement of the field in building the capacities of hundreds of heritage professionals all over the world. He carried out some 85 international conservation missions, lectured in 30 countries, published 7 books, wrote 800 reports and articles, and made 170 presentations at conferences in 35 countries. He was perhaps best known for his role in the drafting of the NARA document on authenticity in 1994, together with Professor Raymond Lemaire, as well as his pivotal role at Kijipogost, Russia, in saving the Church of Transfiguration. Herb Stovall a joué un rôle important dans de nombreuses organisations canadiennes et internationales. Il a été président de l'APT, d'ICOMOS Canada, ainsi que secrétaire général d'ICOMOS International. Hired as the Director of Education at the Heritage Canada Foundation in 1984, he developed the Main Street Canada training program and trained more than 100 Main Street coordinators from across Canada. Herb served as the Director of the Heritage Settlements Unit at ICROM and was presented with the prestigious ICROM Award in 2011. From 2004 to 2012, as professor and coordinator of the Heritage Conservation Program at Carleton University, He trained hundreds of students, making sure they understood that heritage is as much about people as it is about places. Paul Stovall began work in Regina and later in Saskatoon before moving to Ottawa in 1967 to accept a position with the newly created Restoration Services Division. Over a 30-year career, he made significant contributions to conservation engineering, especially in the development of epoxy reinforcement and stabilization methods for masonry and wooden structures. Paul a été un membre de l'APT pendant une longue période. Il a écrit de nombreux articles techniques dans le bulletin de l'APT. During the course of his career, Paul applied his conservation knowledge and interest as a volunteer with international, national, and local organizations, such as APT, ICOMOS Canada, and Heritage Ottawa. His professional expertise also served his community as a member of the Ottawa Local Architectural Conservation Advisory Committee, known as LACAC. Paul was a recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in recognition for his long service to Canada in the field of heritage conservation as both a professional engineer and a community volunteer. Martin Weaver was a life force, an inspirational teacher, a prolific writer and practitioner. He was the author of 140 articles and 40 book reviews on subjects from cathedrals and archaeological sites to ships, airplanes, and rock art. He authored the standard textbook Conserving Buildings, a Manual of Techniques and Materials. En 1972, Jacques Dalibard invite Martin Weaver à se joindre au service de restauration de Parcs Canada. Martin et sa famille déménagent à Ottawa. He quickly becomes a prolific writer and educator at Parks Canada, Heritage Canada, and APT, publishing technical briefs and delivering training programs. Martin was an early and strong advocate and supporter of APT. An early editor of the APT Bulletin, he served as APT's president and was inducted into the APT College of Fellows in 2003. Martin was also a member of both ICOMOS Canada and US ICOMOS, and chaired the ICOMOS International Committee on Wood. He was professor at Columbia University's Historic Preservation Program and director of the university's Center for Preservation Research, where he mentored many generations of new preservationists. These 9 pioneers, Susan Buggy, Jacques Dalibard, Adele Faulkner, Robin Letellier, Bob Phillips, Peter John Stokes, Herb Stovall, Paul Stovall, and Martin Weaver all lived in the National Capital Region during a long period of their prolific careers before they passed away. Leur passion, leur engagement, et leur travail infatigable ont inspiré et fait avancer le domaine de la conservation du patrimoine dans la région de la Capitale nationale, au pays et dans le monde. It merits recognition and our heartfelt gratitude.